the damaged.
Reverend Billy Graham was, of course, at the National Cathedral today at that prayer service in remembrance, and he talked about, under the debris, that there's a foundation that was not destroyed. And he also talked about, from some of my notes, because I was here at CNN and then went home for a little break and came back, so I took some notes there. And he said we have a choice to implode like the buildings with our emotions and as a nation, or we can become stronger. We can rebuild on a strong foundation. And he said rather than having the evil separate and divide us, it has done the opposite. It has actually united us. So Ron from California, thanks very much for your call, and let's go on to Susan in Pennsylvania. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
Go right ahead. You're on the air.
I just wanted to let the people know in New York, which is where I originally come from, that I'm very proud of the way they are handling this. My heart and my tears go out to the families of the people that have suffered through this tragedy. I also want to let President Bush know that we are behind him no matter what he wants to do. And he's brought us together not only as the United States but also spiritually, which was something that was long overdue. I really think he's done a fantastic job.
Ron was talking about a holy war that might need to be waged. Does that worry you when you say that he should do whatever he needs to do?
No, it doesn't worry me because America's a strong place and we will be able to handle anything that we have to. And I just think that sometimes, even though you don't want to go to war, it's something that might have to be done to rid us of these evil people that are out there that instead of just having differences of opinion feel that they have to hurt innocent people in order to do that, and it's just wrong. And I want my kids to grow up to be able to feel that they don't have to worry where they're going because some place is going to be bombed.
You know, talking about your kids, Susan, tell us how old they are, because coming up in our last half hour of this two-hour program that we're doing, we're going to talk with a child psychologist who's going to help us get through that with children and to tell us what we should do to help children. What have you done with your children, and how old are they?
I have an older daughter that's 19, and I also have a 12-year-old. And
are they upset?
Yes, my daughter we're taking collections for the families of the firefighters that are not found yet, and I have a business and I'm taking collections with that, and she's very, very much into doing that and helping out as best she can. Mm-hmm. My younger daughter, she watches TV with me, and I try to make her understand that, you know, there are people that shouldn't be here in this world that do these horrible things, but you know, you can't pin it on any one race. It's the evil people alone, and not the race.
Mm-hmm. All right, Susan from Pennsylvania, hope you can stick around with us here on CNN, because as I was telling you, we do have that child psychologist who is going to be joining us. Coming up as the initial shock subsides, and shock is certainly not a strong enough word sometimes, and denial, but there are calls for retaliation, for vengeance, and they grow louder among some folks. The U.S. President Bush has made it clear that Washington draws no distinction between the terrorists and those who harbor them. Both could find themselves as America's targets, and Mr. Bush has declared a state of national emergency, authorizing the Defense Department to call up as many as 50,000 military reservists, a National Guard. And then late Thursday evening, the U.S. House voted 420-1 to let President Bush exercise what it termed all necessary and appropriate force against those responsible for the attacks. But are you concerned that the United States might strike back before it has all the facts? Is a military campaign the best approach? And is a nation justified to maybe assassinate what it considers terrorist leaders? We want to know what you think about how America should respond. You can call us in the United States at 1-404-221-1855. Let's bring in General Wesley Clark. He is a former NATO commander and CNN's military consultant for us. General Clark, nice to have you join us. Thanks very much.
Nice to be here.
Does the United States have to retaliate? Is there no other choice?
Well, I know we're angry, but I wouldn't call it retaliation. We've got to do something about the threat that faces us.
What would you call it then? A response?
Well, it's a war that's been forced on the United States. Let's call it a response. We have the moral high ground. A terrible thing was done to us. We can't sit back and wait for the next blow to fall on the United States. So we've really got two near-term battles and a long-term campaign. Near-term battle number one is to protect the United States as best we can, and we're doing that with the FBI, and we're looking for these terrorist cells, and we're strengthening our air traffic control procedures and all of the other things that we're doing to protect ourselves at home. That's battle number one, and we've got to win it. Battle number two is if we can do something right away to these terrorist networks overseas, if we can strike at them in some way that throws them off balance, that tears up their plans, that makes them lose their command and control and respond to us and gives us more breathing room, then we should do that.
That was tried in the attack on the Sudan, but I want to go ahead and we're going to go to Jim Clancy and Colleen McEdwards, and we're going to continue our conversation with you, General Clark. But let's get the latest developments here as we carry on with our special programming. Jim and Colleen.
Okay, Donna, thanks very much for just getting the latest developments here for you. We've got a look right now.
Yes, searchers have found the cockpit voice recorder from that hijacked plane that crash landed in Pennsylvania.
That's right, and Congress has passed a joint use of force resolution authorizing President Bush to use the military to go after terrorists and those who harbor them as well.
And authorities say that they have made their first arrest in the investigation of those attacks, a person who was picked up as a material witness.
Well, as authorities continue the investigation into the attacks, Washington is also planning what officials are calling an appropriate response to strike back at terrorism. Experts say that response will likely have more than one dimension to it.
The enemy is in many places. The enemy is not looking to be found. The enemy is hidden. The enemy is very often right here within our own country. And so you have to design a campaign plan that goes after that kind of enemy. And it isn't always blunt force military, although that is certainly an option. It may well be that the diplomatic efforts, political efforts, legal, financial, other efforts may be just as effective against that kind of an enemy as with military force.
Congress has already passed a joint resolution authorizing the president to use force against those responsible for the attacks. Now, to augment the armed forces, the president has authorized the Defense Department to call up reservists. Mr. Bush has given the go-ahead for 50,000 National Guardsmen and reservists to assist with so-called homeland defense plans. Administration officials say the primary role of these troops would be to join recovery and domestic security efforts. And meanwhile, just a short while ago, the House passed a bill authorizing the use of force against those responsible for Tuesday's attacks. The measure swept through 420 votes to 1. The Senate had unanimously approved the resolution. Jonathan Karl has more on that.
On this question, 98 senators have voted in the affirmative. No senator has voted in the negative.
Without dissent and without public debate, the Senate authorized the president to use all necessary force against all those tied to the attacks.
For constitutional purposes, it's the same as a declaration of war. There is no constitutional difference between authorizing the president to use this kind of force and saying we declare war.
The hurried vote united conservatives and liberals who usually disagree about military intervention. Paul Wellstone, whose first significant vote as a senator a decade ago was against the use of force against Iraq in the Persian Gulf War, was one of the few to speak before the vote.
It's going to be a long, difficult struggle, but I believe people in our country and people in Minnesota are united in this. But we need to do this the smart way.
Despite the lack of debate, members of both parties had privately objected to a White House request for a more open-ended authorization of force against terrorists. As a result, the resolution passed authorizes the president to use military action specifically, quote, against those nations, organizations, or persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11, 2001, or harbored such organizations or persons.
It relates to the incident, and there's broad authority relating to the incident. It does not relate to all terrorism every place.
Several key leaders hope to avoid a repeat of the 1964 Tonkin Gulf Resolution, in which Congress, after North Vietnam allegedly attacked U.S. warships, almost unanimously granted President Johnson the authority, quote, to take all necessary measures to prevent further aggression by North Vietnam. Many in Congress came to regret that as the Vietnam War escalated and grew increasingly unpopular. While only Congress has the power to declare war, the president, under the Constitution, has the power to repel invasion. And if a war drags on, Congress, with its power of the purse, can ultimately bring an end to it by refusing to pay for it. Jonathan Karl, CNN, Capitol Hill.
A public opinion survey now suggests Americans overwhelmingly feel that the U.S. should take tough military action. In a CNN and Time poll, 62% of those polled said they feel Congress should declare war on those responsible for Tuesday's atrocities. 27% were opposed. The opinion poll sampling error is plus or minus 3%.
Well, since the attack, searchers have been working around the clock to try to find those who might have survived. In New York City, nobody has been pulled alive from the wreckage in 2 days now. The official number of missing in the attacks on the World Trade Center stands at 4,717 at this point. For their families, as you can imagine, the wait for word on loved ones is agonizing.
I'd like to know if he's dead, that he didn't hurt, and that they didn't suffer, any of them in there. And just, we want to be able to bury him and have the closure to do that.
But you know, Americans came together in communities large and small to remember those who were lost and to support each other as well in this time of mourning. CNN's Bruce Morton has that.
Church services everywhere. America's leadership was at Washington's National Cathedral. Services everywhere. Cleveland, Ohio.
We mourn for the many lives lost in a tragedy that remains etched in our minds forever.
Boston, Massachusetts.
Look with compassion on the whole human family, and especially on those who lost their lives this week.
Sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour.
At the Pentagon, where many lost fellow workers and friends.
May God comfort all of you that are in loss today, and may we wait on Him and renew our strength.
Manchester, New Hampshire. An Islamic service in Sterling, Virginia, near Dulles Airport.
When people accuse you of being terrorists, this is because this is what they were told.
Austin, Texas.
Banish the violence that has been in our midst and the evil that exists around us.
Back at Washington's National Cathedral, the Commander-in-Chief.
This conflict was begun on the timing and terms of others. It will end in a way and at an hour of our choosing.
That service ended with a hymn, a battle hymn. Bruce Morton, CNN, Washington.
Colleen and I will be back with a news update at the top of the hour, but now back to Donna and more of your phone calls.
All right, Jim and Colleen, thanks very much. And we took a pause in our conversation with General Wesley Clark. General Clark, the former NATO commander, as you might remember, and a CNN military consultant currently with us. General Clark, you heard the CNN Time poll said a majority, overwhelmingly, want to see some tough military action. We were just talking about that before we took a pause to get up to date with the news. But how? You were talking about command and control, and I brought up that they tried to do that in the Sudan. How do you go in and make it effective without letting things spiral out of control?
Got to be smart. Got to have good information. We're developing those targets now. I'm very confident. We've done a lot of work inside the U.S. Armed Forces and the intelligence community on Osama bin Laden since 1998. We know a whole lot more now than we did then. And when we strike, if we find an effective way to strike, I'm confident it'll be a pinpoint strike that has real impact. Now, one of the other things we learned, though, in that episode in 1998 is you got to make sure the moderate Arab governments and our allies around the world understand what we're doing, because as Secretary
and support, worldwide support.
As Secretary Powell said, this is a multi-dimensional effort. You have to have diplomatic support. You